Hey, thanks for checking out this video. I've got some really cool CSS tips and tricks that I want to share with you. In this video, we'll create a responsive header navbar, and on the mobile view, it will feature a mega menu and some awesome animations. So let's get started. I'm going to set up the folder structure, and we're going to use Sas today to help us to write the code faster, make it a little bit easier. But don't be scared. If you don't know Sas, I have a video that will teach you the basics in 30 minutes. And I'll put a link in the description below. But if you don't know Sas, you can easily convert this into normal CSS as well. I also have the live Sas Compiler extension installed, and I go over how to install and set that up in the Sas for Beginners video. So I have a distribution folder here already, and in the root of the project, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to name it SCSS. And then within that, we're going to add a main.scss to start with, and we're going to break up all of our major components into separate files. Now within the distribution folder, I have an image directory already with an image that we're going to use. But within the distribution folder, we're going to create our index.html. And then again, within the distribution folder, we're going to create a folder for our JavaScript. So we'll name that JS, and then a new file, and we'll name that main.js. And there's very little JavaScript, it's maybe 5 or 6 lines. All right, so I'm going to close the sidebar, Control B, and then I'm just going to rearrange these a bit. So let's start with our HTML. I'll use emit to create a boilerplate, exclamation, enter. And we'll name this responsive navbar tutorial. And then in the body, we're going to start with a header with a class of main header. And then the first thing in here will be a div with the class of logo. And within that, we'll have an anchor, and that's not going to go anywhere right now. And we're just going to put logo in here as a placeholder. After that, we'll have an input, and the type is going to be a checkbox. And we don't need the name. We're going to give it a class of menu button and an ID of menu button. This input is going to be how we're going to toggle our menu. Instead of using JavaScript to assign classes, we're going to look at the checked property of the checkbox. Right? For our input, we need to add a label, and the label is going to have a class of menu icon, and this is going to be for menu button. So that is why we have an ID here, because we need the label to be linked to the input. All right, then within the label, we're going to have a span with a class of menu icon line. All right, now after the label, we'll have our navigation. So that's going to be a UL with the class of Nav Links. Within that, we'll have an LI with the class of Nav Link, and we'll do that 4 times. All right, now within our nav link, we're going to have an anchor in each one, and it's just not going to go anywhere right now. Then the first one is going to be about, and the second one will be portfolio, and then services and contact. And we're going to have some content on the page just for the demo to have some scrolling ability, because on scroll, we're going to change the look of the header. So I'm going to include a div with the class of hero, and within that we'll have an h1, and we'll just say hero text. Right, then after that, I'm going to have a div with the class of container, and then within that we'll have a paragraph with some lorem. We'll do 20, and then we'll have another paragraph with lorem 50. All right, just before the close of our body tag, we are going to include a script. It's going to be our JavaScript main.js. And then at the top, I forgot to include the link to our CSS. So we'll add a link here, and that's going to be css/main.css. So we're targeting a CSS file that is not created yet. So with our live Sas compiler, it's going to automatically create that. So let me save this, and then I'll open it up with live server, and let's see what it looks like without any styling. All right, so there it is without styling. Now let's work on our CSS. So in our main.scss, first thing that I'll do is import a Google font, and it's Montserrat. And then we'll do some normal resets, box sizing, border box, margin 0, and padding 0. And then in our body, we'll set the font family to Montserrat, and then to sans serif as a fallback. And we're going to style the main content of the website first, and then we'll get to the header navbar. So the main body content is going to be pretty simple. So in our paragraphs, we had a container, and we want to set the width on that to 80%. Then a margin, 2, rem, top and bottom, auto, left and right. So it's going to add a little bit on the top and bottom, and then center it on the page. Within the container, we had a paragraph, so we're going to do some Sas nesting. On the paragraph, we want that to have a margin of 1, rem, top and bottom, and 0, left and right. All right, I'll save that. And then I need to actually turn the live Sas Compiler on. So down here, I'll hit Watch Sas. And there we go. Now we have our changes. We have our output here. So I'm going to go ahead and just close that. Next, we're going to work on our hero container. So we're going to create a new SCSS file. So make sure that you're in the SCSS folder. Create a new file. This is going to be a partial. So go underscore. And this is going to be hero.scss. All right, close the sidebar. Now in our hero, we want the height of that to be 100 view height. And we're going to set the background to the URL, which is our image that we have in our image directory. All right, so that's going to be up a directory, image, sky.jpg. And then we want to set no repeat and bottom center. So we won't always want to see the bottom of the image and the center. We're going to set the background size to cover, and we're going to display this as flex, justify content center, and align items center. That way the H1 is going to be in the middle of the page. We're going to add some padding, 0 top and bottom, left and right of 10 view width. So that's just in case it gets down to a really small mobile device. It's going to stay away from the edges. And then we'll set our color to white because we're going to have a background on here. And I'll show you that in a minute. Let's save this and see what we have so far. And we need to go back to our main SCSS and we need to import that file. So we'll do it at import, and that was hero. And now we have the image and the text, and we're going to do a little bit more on that. So that's looking better. All right, so within the hero, we have our H1. So we'll do some more nesting here. We're going to position this as relative. We'll do a font size of 4 rem. Do a text transform to uppercase. Text align to center. And we'll set a background on here to RGBA 000 and then 0.2 on the opacity. Padding is going to be 2 rem all around. All right, let's save that and see where we're at. That's looking interesting. We're going to do a little bit more to that though. So within our H1, we're going to use some pseudo elements. So we're going to do @ symbol before. So the @ symbol again in SCSS, the @ symbol represents the parent. So it's the same as writing H1 before. Actually, we're going to do the H1 before and the H1 after. So we'll set the content of these to blank. Position of these will be absolute. Top of 0. Height of 100%. So 100% of the available space, not the entire view height. And then the width is going to be 50%. So these are all of the common properties between the before and after that we're going to set. And then we have some individual properties. So now we'll target the before again. And on the before, we want it to start left 0. And border bottom is going to be 6 pixels solid black. So we're just creating a little bit of a detail here. And then we'll do the after. And this one is going to be right 0 and a border top of the same thing, 6 pixels solid black. All right, so let's save that. So what I wanted to do on here is going to add a little bit more style on the H1. We're going to set a border radius. So the border radius will accept up to 4 values. So it starts on the top left, and then top right, bottom left. That's the order that it goes in. I want the top left and the bottom right to have a radius, and the top right and bottom left not to have a radius. So I'm going to do 20 pixels, 0, and that's all that I have to do. So 20 pixels will target the top left and bottom right, and the second number will be our top right and bottom left. Let's save that. There we go. Just adds a little bit of style to that. I'm zoomed in a little too far here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. All right, so that's all the styling that we're going to do for the hero and the paragraphs. Now we're going to get to the Navbar. So let's open up the sidebar. In our SCSS folder, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to name it _header.scss. Right, and close the sidebar. Let's go to our main and go ahead and import that before we forget. All right, so now in the header, we'll start with the main header. And we'll set the position on that to fixed. We always want it to be at the top. We're going to display this as flex. And then justify content is going to be space between. And then align items will be center. All right, so let's save that and see where we're at. All right, looking a little bit better. We're going to set the height on this to a fixed height. It's going to be 65 pixels. The width will be 100 view width. We'll set the padding to 0 top and bottom, 10 view width left and right. So we want a little bit of room on the edges. We'll set the color on that to black. And we're going to set a Z index on here of 1. So when we're scrolling down, we want the header to always remain on top of everything. All right, so let's save that. All right, so that's looking better. We have our logo over here. We're going to get rid of this checkbox in a minute, and we'll do some styling on the links as well. So within our main header, we'll do some more nesting. We have all of our anchor tags. We want to set the text decoration to none. And the color, we're going to say inherit. So it's going to inherit the color from the main header, whatever it's set to. And then we'll do a text transform to uppercase. Save that. Now our links are looking better. All right, so now let's look at the Nav Links. So the class was Nav Links. And on the Nav Links, we're going to display these as flex as well. And we're going to say list style. Whoops. List style is going to be none. So we can get rid of those bullet points. There we go. Now they're all in a row since we set them to flex. And if you're not familiar with FlexBox, I have a video on that as well. I'll put a link in the description below. All right, now within our Nav Links, we have our Nav Link. So each individual link. So we're going to come back and set some properties in here when we get to our animations. But for now, we want to target our anchors within our Nav Link. And we're going to set the margin on those to 0.2 rem. And the padding is going to be 1 rem top and bottom and 0.5 rem left and right. All right, save that. So that spaces them out. And then we can go ahead and add our hover. So when we hover over our anchors here, we're going to set the background. We're going to set the background to RGBA white with a 0.2 opacity. All right, so when I hover over it, it's just a slight effect there that we can see that it's being hovered. All right, so that's going to be it for the Nav Links. So make sure that you're still within the main header, which should be this one, right? Main header. Now we're going to look at our menu icon. And so this is going to be the hamburger menu. We're going to set the position on this to relative. We'll set a padding of 26 pixels top and bottom and 10 pixels left and right. We'll set the cursor to pointer, and we're going to set a z-index on this as well of 1. Initially we're going to set this to display as none, but I'm going to comment that out for now. We'll come back to that. Alright, so the menu icon is the wrapper around the hamburger lines. So now we need to target the lines. And within that we had one span, and it was named menu icon underscore line. Alright, so with the BIM naming methodology, it makes things a little bit easier. Instead of having to type .menu icon underscore line, we can just use the ampersand. Makes it a little bit easier. All right, so on the lines, we're going to display this as block. We're going to position this as relative. We're going to set the background to black. We'll have a height of 2 pixels and a width of 20 pixels. And I want a slight border radius just to knock off the edges. So we'll do 4 pixels. Let's save that. All right, so now we have one line. Now we need the other 2. And so for that, we're going to use pseudo elements. So within the line, we're going to use ampersand before. So now this ampersand refers to the menu icon line. Right? It always refers to the parent. All right, so we're actually going to style both the before and after. So we'll do ampersand after, and all of the properties that they have in common will be here. So content will be blank, position on this will be absolute, height will be 100% of the available height, and the width will be 100% of the available width. We'll set the border radius on this as well, 4 pixels. And then the items that will be different will be, so we'll target the before, and the difference here will be that the before is going to translate y -5 pixels. And then let's highlight that, Alt-Shift down arrow, duplicate it, change this one to after, and this one is going to translate y 5 pixels. All right, so the before is going to move up, so the y is your vertical axis. It's going to move up 5 pixels, and the after is going to move down 5 pixels. All right, so let's save that. Actually, I forgot to add the background. That's why we can't see anything. Background needs to be black. And save that again. Now we have our hamburger menu. And once we get to our animations, we're going to be transitioning this to from black to white. So let's go ahead and just add our transitions in here. So we'll need a transition for the background. We're set to 0.8 seconds, and we'll just set it ease. That's on our before and after. We're also going to need this on the line element. So after the menu icon, let's target the menu button. And so that's the checkbox. And we always want the checkbox to display none. We never want to see that. But before I save that, actually, let me show you. So we have the checkbox here, and I can click the checkbox and it checks, right? But since we have, let me go back to the HTML here. Since we have the for attribute on the label targeting the input, when we click the label, it also checks the checkbox. So that's what we're doing here. It's a neat little trick. The checkbox is going to be hidden, but as long as we're clicking the label, the checkbox will check and uncheck, and we can check that in CSS. All right, so let's save that. Now, I did put the input and the label before the nav menu for a reason, and that will become apparent in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and just finish up the desktop view here. So we had the icon menu initially does need to be display none. All right, so then on a desktop view, this is what you'll see. And now as we scroll down, you can see that the text is going to start overlapping on top of other text, and it's going to be hard to read. So we need to add a background to this header whenever it's scrolled. But when we're at the top of the page, we don't want the background to be there. So in order to do that, we're going to write a little bit of JavaScript to add a class to the header. And actually, let's go ahead and just write the class first. So within our main header still, so it's going to be main header dot scrolled. We're going to set the height on this to 50 pixels. So initially it was 65. We're going to take it down to 50. We're going to set a background of RGBA. I want it to be slightly transparent. It's going to be black with a 0.9 opacity. And then the color needs to be white. All right, so initially the color is black. Once we scroll and the background pops up, we need the color to change to white. All right, then within that, we'll also need to change the color of our menu icon. So menu icon. So this is saying anytime the main header is scrolled, we want to target the menu icon, and we want to change the background of the lines. And so in order to do that, we'll say menu icon with the ampersand, underscore, underscore line. We're also going to target the ampersand, underscore, underscore line before and the after. And on all of these, we want to set the background to white. All right, so let me go back up here to the menu icon and comment the display none out so we can see it. All right, and so now what we need to do is we have the class set up. We need to set our JavaScript now. All right, so just some very basic JavaScript. We're going to set a constant of header. It's going to equal document.querySelector. And we're going to select the main header. All right, and so that's the only constant that we need. Now we're going to target the window, and we're going to add an event listener. We're going to look for the scroll event. On scroll, we'll have an arrow function. If you're not familiar with JavaScript ES6 arrow functions, I have a video on that as well. Within the scroll event, we'll have a constant of scroll position. We'll set that equal to window.scrollY. Y is our vertical scroll, so we want to know where we're at vertically. Now we'll say if the scroll position is greater than, you could put whatever you'd like in here. You could put if it's greater than 0. I just put 10, give it a little bit of room, and then add the background. All right, so if it's scrolled past 10, we'll want to set the header and target the class list and add scrolled. Now you could use toggle here, but I found that every time this runs, it kind of creates a little bit of a glitch. As you're scrolling, the header will actually start blinking. So we're going to use an else statement. And so if it's less than 10, basically, we want to set the header class list and remove scrolled. All right, so that is all of the JavaScript. So I'll save that. And now as we scroll, there we go. It changes, but it's kind of abrupt. So we do need to add some transitions there. So let's go back to our header. And then on our main header, we're going to add a transition of 0.4 seconds, ease out. Save that. Now as we scroll, you see it kind of slowly fades in. So that looks a lot better. All right, so let's go ahead and display none on the menu icon again. And so that is going to be everything for the desktop setup. Now we'll style the mobile view and make it responsive. All right, so let's open the sidebar. And then in the SCSS, we're going to create another file, and we'll name that _media.scss. Close the sidebar, Control B. And here we'll create our media query. We'll say @media, green, and max width of 767. So I use 767 because an iPad is 768, and it still looks good on an iPad. This is about 768 right here, and I'm zoomed in 125%. So if I zoom out 100%, this is about the size of an iPad, and it still looks fine. So 767 would be anything under an iPad. All right, so now we're going to start out with our main header, and we will add some stylings here, but first let's look at our menu icon. All right, within the menu icon, we're going to display this as block. Initially, we had set it to none. Then after that, we're going to look at our Nav Links. And so Nav Links is our UL, basically in our Navbar, it's our UL. And we want to turn this into a full page mega menu. So we're going to set the position on this to absolute, set the top to 0, left to 0, opacity, we want it to be set to 0, but right now I'll set it to 1. We'll come back and change that in a minute. Set the flex direction to column. So when we enable display flex, the default direction is row. So we're going to set this to a column. We'll set the justify content to space evenly and the align items to center. So space evenly is going to space them evenly on the vertical axis, and align items will center them horizontally. We're going to set a padding of 10 rim top and bottom, 0 left and right. We'll set the width to 100 view width and the height to 100 view height. We want the font size to be 2 rim. Make it a little bit larger. All right, and then the color we'll set to white. And the background will be a dark gray. All right, so let's save that and see where we're at so far. Actually, I need to include the media in our main SCSS. So import media. Now we can save it. There's our mega menu. And we could do something boring like have it come in from the top or have it fade in or something like that. But we're going to use clip path. So let me show you that. So clip path, we're going to use circle, and let's just initially set it to 200 pixels. All right, now if I save that, all right, you'll see how it's creating basically a mask. If you're familiar with Photoshop or any image editing software, you'll know what a mask is. So we're masking off everything outside of this 200 pixel circle. So what I want to do is I want this circle to start at the top right. All right, so the circle is now up here, and we're going to have the circle expand until it fills the entire screen. So for that, we'll set a transition here, and we're going to transition 2 properties. First, the opacity. We want that to take 0.8 seconds, and we want that to delay 0.5 seconds. And then we're also going to transition the clip path. That I want to take 1 second with a 0.5 second delay. All right, so nothing's going to happen right now. This is just setting it up. All right, so let me change the opacity to 0. That's where we want it to initially start. And now to make this do something, we'll need to be within the main header. All right, so here we'll target the main header and then the menu button, which is our checkbox. And we're going to check for the checked property. So if the button is checked, Then we want to look at its sibling of Nav Links. So remember, I said that I arranged these in the HTML for a certain reason. So the input and label is before the Nav Links. So when we're using a sibling selector, it can only select siblings after itself. So if the Nav Links were above this, I wouldn't be able to select it. All right, so if it's checked, Nav Links, we want to set the opacity to 1 and the clip path to circle 100% at center. All right, so let's save that. And now if I click this, there you go. So we'll change the hamburger menu to white in a minute. If I uncheck that, it goes away. So what I want to do next is, as this expands, I want the links to slide in from the right. All right, so in order to do that, we need to set it up first. So in our Nav Links, we'll need to target our Nav Link. So the individual links, initially we want the opacity to be 0, and we're going to transform and translate X 100%. So that is going to move it 100% of its width to the right. All right, we're going to set the width to 100% of the available width. And we want to text align center so that the text is centered. All right, now within the Nav Link, which is the LI, we have our anchors. So let's target those. We want those to display block and padding of 2 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. All right, so let's save that. And now if I click it, we're not going to see anything. Everything is set to a 0 opacity. So this is, again, this is our setup. And now we have to look at when it's checked, what do we want it to do? All right, so within here, we can target our Nav Link. And we want the opacity to be 1 and the transform translate X, we want that to be 0, so back to its initial position. And we'll set a transition, and we're going to set a couple of properties here. The opacity is going to be 0.4 seconds, and we're going to set an ease in out on that. And then the transform, we want that to take 0.6 seconds, and we're going to use cubic Bezier. So we're going to basically create a custom easing. So what this does is it basically creates a bounce. So the menu item is going to come in from the right, slightly overshoot its position, and then go back, and it's going to be like an elastic bounce effect. All right, so let's save this and see what we have. They're actually coming in before the clip path is complete. So we need to add a delay on these. So we're going to add a delay of, let's just say 1 second. And we'll change that in a minute, but just for the demonstration, we'll put 1 second on the delay. And there you go. You can see how they all come in, and it's a bit of a bounce into their position. All right, so I actually want them to come in individually. So how we can do that is, let's take that delay back off. And now we will target each link individually. So within the Nav Link, we can say ampersand inth of type 1. And so on this one, we want to set the transition delay. We're going to set it to 0.7 seconds. And then we'll need to copy this. We have 4, so we need to copy this 3 times. So select it, Alt-Shift down arrow, 2, 3, 4. Change this to 2, 3, and 4. We'll change this to 0.8, 0.9, and then 1 second. Let's save that. And there we go. Now we will have to work on the transition out as well. and we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so now let's look at our menu button. We need to change the color on that. All right, so make sure that you're still within the main header, which is right here. All right, so here we're going to target the menu button checked again. We want to see if it's checked. And if it is, we want to look at the sibling and the menu icon this time. All right, so we're going to add another animation here in a minute, but I'll come back to that. So we're targeting the menu icon. So now within the menu icon, if the menu button is checked, we'll need to target the menu icon line. We'll set the background to white. I'm just going to copy that, and then within that, we'll target the before. Set that to white, and the after to white. Let's save that. And now when we click it, it turns white. When we uncheck it, it goes back to black. All right, so that's what we're looking for. Now, I put all these separately because we're going to be adding some more code in here for the animation, which we'll get to in just a second. First, we're going to add an animation to the open, one last animation. So when I click on the button initially, I want a pulse of a white color circle to come out from this button across the screen, and then it opens. Within our menu icon, so if it's checked, the menu icon, we want to set a border radius of 50%, and that makes the circle. And then we're going to set an animation, and we'll call the animation pulse, and we want it to last 1 second. All right, I'll save that. And now let's open our sidebar. And then in our SCSS folder, we're going to create another file. We're going to call it animations. All right, close the sidebar, and then let's go over to our main and import that. Oops. Rename that animations.scss. All right, within our animations, let's create a new animation. So we start with keyframes, and we named it pulse. All right, and so we'll say from, and I'm just going to copy and paste this in because it's a bunch of box shadow and background. Okay, so we'll go over this. So box shadow, we want it set to 0, 0, 0, 0 initially, right? So set it all to a white color at 0.6 opacity, and we want the background to be the same color as well. And then we'll go to, and I'll just copy and paste this. So box shadow again, but this time we're going to have a 1000 pixel spread. So that is where it will end, and it's going to be an opacity of 0. And the background will transition to an opacity of 0 as well. All right, so let me save that, and you'll see what this does. It's harder to explain than it is to show. All right, hopefully you saw that. It was just a quick pulse that came out, and then the menu opened. Let me do it again. All right, so the background is targeting the background of the hamburger menu, the menu icon. Because if we didn't do that, then you'd see a black circle here, and then the pulse coming out from that. We don't want to see a black circle behind the hamburger menu. All right, one more time. There we go, looks nice. All right, so now let's look at our actual hamburger animation. So I want this to change into an X. So for that, let's go back to our media query. And at the top here, under our menu icon, we're going to select our menu icon line. And we're going to set the animation on here to, we're going to name it closed mid 0.8 seconds backwards. This is going to make sense in a minute. The animation direction needs to be reverse, right? And then we'll target our before, and that is going to be an animation, and we'll name this one closed top 0.8 seconds backwards. and then an animation direction of reverse. All right, I'm going to copy this, Alt-Shift down arrow, and change this to after, whoops, and this will be closed bottom. Okay, so we're going to name these animations mid. Mid is the middle line, and the actual element is the middle line. The before is the top line, and the after is the bottom line. So we need to target these individually so that we can add animations to them. So this is our initial setup. So this is on when it's closed. What does it look like when it's closed? Now, and next we'll set up the open. So for that, we'll go back to our checked and the menu icon. Okay, so remember we said we're going to add some more stuff here. So on the main element, this is going to be the middle line. So we're going to add an animation here. And we'll say open mid 0.8 seconds forwards. All right, and then I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to add that to our before and our after. But the before is going to be the top animation, and the after will be the bottom animation. All right, I'll save that. It's not going to do anything right now because we have to create those animations. All right, so we'll go back to our animations here. All right, so we'll do another keyframe, and we'll start with the top. So we'll say open top, and at 0%, we want to transform, translate Y, -5 pixels, and rotate 0 degrees. All right, so I'm going to just take that, Alt-Shift down arrow twice. So we're going to have 0%, 50%, and 100%. So what I want it to do is I want it to collapse into the middle and then rotate out into an X. So at the 50% mark is going to be our collapse. So we'll change this to 0 pixels and 0 degrees. So that will take the top one and move it down to the middle and keep it horizontal. And then at the 100% mark, we still want it to be at 0 pixels on the vertical axis, but we want the degrees to change to 90. Now you might say, well, that's straight up and down, but you'll see in a minute why this is. Okay, so that is the open top. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing here and paste it, and this is going to be the open mid. And for the open mid, we are not going to have a 0% because it doesn't have to collapse. Mid is already where it needs to be. Okay, so for the mid, we don't need the translate. We're just going to rotate, right? So the mid at 50% will be at 0 degrees. At 100%, it will be at 45 degrees. And so let's copy the top one, and we'll do the bottom. So this is going to be open bottom. All right, and so instead of a -5, it's going to be a +5. This is where it starts at 0 degrees. In the middle will be at 0 pixels and 0 degrees. And then at 100%, 0 degrees and 90 degrees. So the only reason why we have to have two separate animations here is because of this. Instead of a -5 pixels, it's a +5 pixels. All right, so let's save that and see where we're at so far. And there we go. It collapses and then rotates into an X. All right, so remember I said that the 90 degrees on the pseudo elements was going to make sense in a minute. So the main element, the middle, is rotating 45 degrees, which is also rotating the pseudo elements 45 degrees as well. And so what we're doing is actually adding 90 degrees to that 45 degrees. So the total rotation for the pseudo elements is 135 degrees. It's not going to animate the opposite way yet because we haven't written those animations. So now let's look at our close animations. So the close animations are basically going to be the exact same thing, except remember we're going to run them in reverse. Now, you might say, why can't we just use the animations that we've already written? Well, once you've assigned an animation to an element, you can't restart it. You have to start a new animation. And so since these are already started, we can't restart them. So what we'll have to do is we'll just copy this, and we're going to name it closed top. And then for the mid, we're just going to copy it and rename it to closed mid. And then the same for the bottom. Copy it and close bottom. I'll save that. And let's try it again. There, opens just fine. And now close, animates out. I'm going to zoom in, that way we can see it better. All right, I'll click it. There we go. And click it again, animates out. Nice. All right, and so the last thing that I want to do on the media is I want to make this text a little bit smaller. On a phone, that's going to be too big. So let's go down to within our, all right, so outside of the main header, so but within the media query, right? So it'll be right here. We'll do the hero and then H1, and then let's just set the font size of that to 2 rem. All right, just makes that a little bit smaller. So if we go to, let me hit F12, go to our dev tools, and then let's set this to something iPhone X. So that looks good. Click it. Everything works. Looks good on the iPhone. Then we go up to, let's see, 8 Plus. Still looks good. All right. And then let's go to iPad. That looks normal. If I scroll down, header looks good. iPad Pro, same thing. Looks good. All right. So if we scroll down, we can see that the header changes here on the mobile side as well. And if we click the animation works, everything works just as it should. Hit the X again, goes back out. And something to note here is that it's smart enough if the menu is open and then we expand to a desktop size, the menu is going to go away and the normal menu will pop up here. So next we need to look at the exit animation for the nav links. So currently when we open it, they come in just fine, but when we close it, they just disappear. So in our header SCSS, under Nav Links, within Nav Links, so each link, we need to make some modifications here. All right, so we'll set a transition, and we're going to transition a couple of properties, the opacity. We're going to set that to 0.4 seconds, ease in, out. And then the transform, set that to 0.6 seconds. And we're going to use that cubic Bezier. Just like that. Actually, we need a comma there. All right. So that is our transition. And then we need to set a delay on each of the links. Okay, so what we'll do is within the nav link, we can use ampersand, and then we need nth of type, and we're going to start with 2 because we want the first one to transition immediately. The second, third, and fourth we want to add a delay to. So we'll say transition delay, and we'll add just a 0.1 second, and then I will copy this down, Alt-Shift down arrow 2 times. We'll change this one to 3 and 4. And then we'll change the delay to 0.2 and 0.3. And that should be it. Let's save that. And we'll open the menu. It looks good. And let's close the menu. Nice. One more time. All right, that's looking good. All right, something that's bugging me is this line on the bottom of the hero text. It's outside of the element. So if I zoom in more here, you'll see it's below it. And the reason for that is because in our resets in our main.scss, we have box sizing set to border box, but that does not apply to our pseudo elements. So in order to fix that, we'll need to add the pseudo elements to the resets. Just like that. And now when I save it, now you see that it's within the element. So before, it wasn't taking into account the margin padding and borders. Alright, one last thing that I want to look at is we want to make this accessible on any device. So for screen readers, if the checkbox is not displayed, then it can't be accessed. We can't tab into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the display none off, and we're going to set the position to absolute, and then we're just going to push it off of the screen. So we'll set a top and negative 100 pixels. That should do it. Alright, and so now it's off the screen. And if I click into here and I hit tab, you can see that we're on the logo right now. And if I hit tab one more time, there's no indicator, but we're on the checkbox. So if I hit space, the menu opens. And if I hit space again, the menu closes. Alright, so now we just need to add some sort of indicator so that we know that we have tabbed over to the menu. So after the menu button, we're going to use ampersand, so menu button focus, and then we'll use the sibling selector again and menu icon. Alright, so when the menu button or the checkbox is focused, we want the menu icon, which is the hamburger icon. We want that to have some sort of an indication that we've tabbed over to it. Alright, so within here, we'll target our menu icon line, and then we will use ampersand before, and we're going to set a transform translate Y. Initially we have it set to a -5 pixels, so we're going to set it to a -7 pixels. And then I'm going to Alt-Shift down, copy that, change this to after, and then change this to a +7 pixels. Alright, I'll save that. When I tab over to it, it should slightly move to indicate that we have tabbed over to it. There we go. If I hit space, transitions, space, it transitions back. Alright, so that should address the accessibility. Alright, so let's look at it one more time. Menu looks good. Everything animates. Let's expand it a bit. Looks good. Scroll down. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. And if my videos have helped you in any way, and you have the means to do so, check out my Patreon. So before you go, if you liked this video, a thumbs up is appreciated. I upload new content every week, so hit subscribe and the bell to get notified. And if you think this video or any of the videos on my channel might be helpful to someone else, please share them. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at CodeStacker. Thanks for watching.